you very much. I definitely want to thank the ILP and MIT Startup Exchange for actually organizing this. This is a really incredible opportunity for us to learn more about what's going on in the world in terms of startups as academics, and also to get better at working together. So what I'm going to be discussing with you is about disruptive materials, but it's in the context of advanced manufacturing and Advanced Manufacturing Institute. So I wanted to use this time to bring some new mechanisms for funding opportunities that really do impact startups to your attention. And they work on a variety of topics, but several of them really touch on the Internet of Things. So I am a faculty member in Material Science and Engineering and Biological Engineering here at MIT. And I have also been the co-lead, along with MIT's provost, on the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership 2.0, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, or AMP, was launched in 2011-2012 by the President of the US. So President Obama's administration launched this, and it was a government, industry, academic partnership to figure out what the country needed to do to move the needle forward in manufacturing in terms of the workforce, in terms of the policy, and in terms of the technology. So MIT and Dow co-led that effort over the past several years. And I'll go over some of the results from that, but it was very much not a paper-producing exercise. It was really about taking action and getting things started in a rapid way. And boy, have they ever. So they have actually started quite rapidly with all of the advantages and disadvantages of a rapid startup of an entirely new partnership between industry and academia and government. So we can talk a little bit about that, and I'm happy to answer any questions in the panel. But the effort was focused on action that didn't require new legislation or approval for that legislation, and ideally wouldn't even require new appropriations, although those would, of course, be welcome. So the key outcomes of that effort of about 20 universities, academics, from the community college to the university level, 20 industry partners ranging from integrators to startups to intermediary organizations, worked together over several years to put forth recommendations. I won't go through all of them, but they are available online under PCAST, the President's Committee of Advisors for Science and Technology. So the very first report in the 2014 cycle is from Advanced Manufacturing. So I can point you to that, or we can send that link out. But that goes through the full report and the recommendations in detail that were approved for the President. One of the outcomes was that AMP, this group of essentially volunteers working on this in the national interest, developed a list of 11 cross-cutting technologies that they thought were very ripe for advanced manufacturing innovation. That list has been further narrowed down and debated, and really the list of 11 is not so important as the process by which industry, government, academia work together to come up with that list, realizing that if you want the government as a partner to help grow some of these efforts in infrastructure, you can't work on all kinds of manufacturing, so you have to double down on a narrowed list. And so that conversation and that process has been very important. So we have a narrower list as a country moving forward, even from that initial 11, and that will be dynamic and that will be revisited, but it's a way of signaling to industry, to startups, to academia, and even to local governments where we could all work together towards common goals. Another outcome between AMP 1.0 and 2.0, so two different versions of this effort, was that MIT spent a lot of internal effort developing studies and reports, such as the Production in the Innovation Economy study that resulted in several books like Making in America and Production in the Innovation Economy. So those were co-authored and edited by MIT authors. I'm sure you can go to MIT Press and get a copy of them if you're interested. And Suzanne Berger has done a lot to actually advance this by interviewing many companies, large and small, and also by studying other countries besides the US to identify best practices. So what's worked, what hasn't, what could be adapted to work in the US. And then another follow-up from that AMP report was AMP made recommendations to the president in 5 buckets, okay? And these are outlined in that report on PCAST, which you can check out if you're interested. The first bucket of analysis was on manufacturing technology. So going from that list of 11 to a smaller list, but more importantly, figuring out the process by which you do that. How do you pull in industry experts and academic experts from all over the country who typically compete with each other and find the pre-competitive space to work on manufacturing? And that's also relevant to Internet of Things. Workforce development, so how to actually build a workforce that may not exist yet and make sure that it impacts across the supply chain. Scale-up policy, and you'll hear a little bit more from that, and an expert on that who led our team was Liz Reynolds, and she's here today. So thinking about the financing aspects and the policy aspects that would make companies grow and thrive here. The manufacturing institutes, which I'll talk about more briefly, and then the image of manufacturing in the US. So moving from dirty and dangerous to something that is high impact and innovative, right? So the team worked on these and made recommendations. Many of those, all of those recommendations, the final 11 that were made to the president, are being executed. And you've seen that, whether or not they were directly tied to AMP. So one of the things that AMP recommended and has been implemented is the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation. So what that really means right now is that there's a series of manufacturing innovation institutes that have been launched throughout the country or are currently being competed. The first one, which was really a pilot test of this idea, has gone through several name changes. So you might hear this referred to as America Makes, which is the current name, or additive manufacturing, or 3D printing. Okay, all of that was that same experiment, and that's located centrally in Ohio. And then there's various topics here. The ones that are going to connect most directly to the Internet of Things and the evolution of that into manufacturing and production are digital manufacturing and design. So that is an institute that is headquartered in Illinois now. Integrated photonics, so actually moving photonics onto a CMOS platform and technology. That team includes, the competing team includes MIT, and we're waiting for the government to announce where that will be located. Flexible hybrid electronics, this ties in directly, and our MIT principal investigator on that effort was Brian Anthony, who's here today, so he can tell you a lot more and will tell you a lot more about how this relates to Internet of Things and sensors. And then revolutionary fibers and textiles. I'll speak a little bit more on this because this is one that is actually being led out of Massachusetts and is currently under competition and very connected to Internet of Things from the perspective of Internet of Wearables. Okay? And then finally, smart manufacturing, which is the government shorthand for a focus on sensors and data analytics, and MIT is a strong member of that team. But it's not just about MIT. I'll tell you in the example of this one, revolutionary fibers and textiles, these manufacturing institutes include industry in a really big way, and one of the ways that they are key partners impacts on startups. So this helps startups form from new ideas that are developed at lower manufacturing readiness levels, so not quite ready for pilot scale production. It gives startup companies access to the full supply chain in that particular network, which is one of the big efforts. It de-risks the manufacturing processes that the startup company may need to develop in order to get to full-scale production. It also facilitates obtaining investment for these often capital-intensive operations, demos pilot-scale production, so startup companies can use these institutes to show what they have in order to network with larger companies or different sectors of the market in these testbed facilities, and then more generally collaborate with partners in a faster network than they'd be able to develop on their own. So in the context of revolutionary fibers and textiles, this has been extremely advantageous in terms of turning, this is not your grandmother's textile here, okay? So instead of going from fibers that are used to cover us, protect us for modesty and warmth, we're really now transitioning, and this is the vision of this team, the Advanced Functional Fabrics of America, to an Internet of Things and an Internet of Wearables where every single fiber is a device capable of sensing, responding, transmitting data and information. And that innovation has been created all over the world. One of the places is MIT. So here I'm showing you MIT is leading a team, convened but including many other states and dozens of industry partners, including several Massachusetts-based startups. This picture that I'm showing you here is the preform of one of those highly advanced fibers that was a startup company called OmniGuide that actually put semiconductors and other materials at the nanoscale in the fiber, turned those fibers into optical waveguides that were used as optical scalpels, created a whole new market for surgery, and has now been FDA approved and already treated 100,000 patients worldwide for the internal removal of cancerous polyps. So that sounds great. So why do we need an institute if we have startups that can transition? It's the time scale. Okay, so from the initial invention to the treatment of the patients, that took about a dozen years. The idea is the manufacturing institutes accelerate that technology adoption and innovation, and they also provide more chances to get from here to there. So we're now able to produce thousands of pounds of fiber. This is drawing that down to fibers that would be used not only for the surgical applications, but for other applications so you can enter new markets. So that same principle, again, developed at the startup level and then expanded, has been incorporated into military textiles. So here's an example that may look like regular camouflage, but has been engineered to have particular functions to do with the optical properties, including friend versus foe detection, right? Because these are really optical waveguides in your material. So you can really change the markets and open up entirely new markets by using innovation institutes like these, and the idea is to get that innovation pipeline down from a dozen years to a couple of years by really working together and developing the supply chain together. This does require investment, either in kind, which is typical for a startup, or with cash from industry, but it's really been a benefit to the startups who've participated and has a large workforce training component that benefits startups. So I will end there, and I'm happy to answer any questions during the panel in terms of how these materials and how these manufacturing institutes work. So thank you.